Uh, uh, I really, really, really wanted to like this movie. I really did want to like Spectre. I really love Skyfall. I am a fan of James Bond, and I really wanted to love this movie, but I just could not do it. And I saw the film on IMAX, folks. I didn't see it on a cam. I didn't see it anything like that. I saw it in IMAX in the theater, and it was one of the most depressing and soul-sucking experiences I've had sitting in the theater this year. It was just draining all the life out of me. It's glacial pacing. It's lead in Daniel Craig, who I do like, looking like he just doesn't give a shit. Like he wants to be in another movie. Like he just looked very tired behind the eyes. He looked lifeless. He really didn't look like he had much life to him. It really, and it carried over into the rest of the movie. It didn't help either that the film had really long stretches where almost nothing happened. Nothing important to the film, nothing important to the script, no action. I know Bond films aren't usually fast and furious action movies, but that doesn't mean that they're glacially paced. I mean, this was one of the most boring and frustrating films I've seen this year. And it's because I know personally that this film can be a lot better than it is. Didn't have super high expectations for Spectre. I just wanted it to be a step below Skyfall, and if it could, be as good as Skyfall, which I didn't feel it was going to be because that's a really hard act to follow. But I sure was not expecting Spectre to be not even an average Bond film. This is as bad as Quantum of Solace to me, but just for a different reason. Quantum of Solace was bad because of bad shaky cam and a pretty bad story. Same problem with Spectre, but it's just stretched out to over 140 minutes. So, yeah, I really, really wanted to like this movie, but I just couldn't do it. I mean, when your film is so long and so poorly paced that I can take not one but three piss breaks just because I wanted to, because I knew I wasn't going to miss anything, and, I had no desire to keep sitting around watching what I was watching. I mean, there are films where I've held it all the way to the end of the movie because I was that engaged in the film. Spectre didn't do that for me. It wasn't consistent enough. It was so inconsistent. It was maddeningly inconsistent. You have an excellent, rousing, fantastic opening sequence in Mexico with a great helicopter chase that's quite honestly, without a doubt, the most thrilling sequence out of the entire movie. It was a great way to start the film. Loved that sequence. I loved it. It was great. And I was like, this is a good way to start. All right. Had the edge that I was looking for from a Daniel Craig film. It felt like a Daniel Craig Bond film. And then we get to the credit scene. And that was the first sign of trouble because you have Sam Smith who's singing this absolutely terrible song, Writings on the Wall, which does sound like he wrote on the toilet in like 5 minutes, and even he admits, I wrote it like in a day, and it shows. It's such a generic song. The lyrics aren't memorable at all. The only thing that's memorable about the song is the background music, which wasn't even anything that Sam Smith did. That was music that was composed by Thomas Newman, who I honestly thought his score is one of the few bright spots out of this movie. So, and then you have Sam Smith's vocals, which are just as inconsistent as the film. The song is just as inconsistent as the movie Spectre. You have a good background, you have good background music, good beat, and then you have Sam Smith who does a good job with the "If I Risk It All." I don't think I did that one right because I don't remember the tune. So I'm like, "If I risk it all," you know, "Will you break my fall" type song. If I risk it all. I don't remember the whole fucking thing. I'm not even trying to sing it because I honestly, I don't want to sing. So he has a powerful vocal where he goes, "If I risk it all, would you break my fall?" And then it goes from power vocals to this whiny falsetto, which just sounds horrible. It sounds horrible. What is up with this new trend of guys with falsetto being a big thing? It just sounds terrible. It does not work with a Bond film. This doesn't scream Bond. Even if a female vocalist sang the song, it still wouldn't fit with Bond. It's not badass enough. It's not. It doesn't have enough of an impact. It's not a Bond song. Period. So you go from Adele's Skyfall, which was a very old-fashioned, wonderful song that reminded me of the stuff like Shirley Bassey used to do for the Bond series, to Sam Smith's Writings on the Wall, which just sucked. It was like one of the worst Bond songs. Even my stepdad was like, "This song sucks." I'm like, "It does." Because you go, "If I risk it all, will you break my fall?" And then, suffocating, I want to feel love right in my mind. It just sounds terrible. It's such a fucking terrible. What? That's not Bond. That's terrible. And then you have, if the song isn't bad enough, you got the whole opening credits sequence, which, for the most part, yes, it's well done, but I don't think it's a good mix. It's not a good blend of elements. What am I talking about? Okay, you have octopuses, because it's Spectre. So you have all these octopuses putting their tentacles around sexy women, and I don't know about you, but that doesn't turn me on. I think though it doesn't. It's just fucking creepy and weird. And then you have all these shots of people with skulls because of the Day of the Dead sequence in Mexico, which is a really great sequence, by the way. And but it doesn't work. It looks like a hentai lover necrophiliac's wet dream. That's what it looks like. It looks like a hentai porno lover slash necrophiliac's wet dream. It's just not at all a good opening credit sequence. I know people are saying it's one of the best ones yet. I'm like, how? Tentacles aren't sexy. Octopuses around women isn't sexy. It's just fucking weird. And then you have an octopus and then is jumping at the screen with an explosion in the background. I mean, that's one of the silliest shit I've ever seen in one of these opening credit sequences. I liked how they tied in all of the other films with certain visuals. I did like that, but the song was just so meandering and so so shitty. Not even mediocre. It's not even mediocre. So meandering that it just none of it ever worked. And that's too bad because the film brought back the whole Bond walking up to the gun. You see the inside of the gun barrel, shoots the gun, and then the blood fills up the screen. I really love seeing that again. But it was just, and then you had the awesome sequence of Mexico. I'm like, oh, this might be really good, and then it was just all downhill from there. Because that's when the film just starts this glacial pacing where it just does not want to keep your pulse pounding. And it just, for some reason, I know there's a lot of people who like this, but for some reason, this film decided to throw away everything that the franchise had built up to this point. Everything that the franchise had tried hard to do to separate itself from the other Bond films, to make it its own, to make it a Bond franchise for the new millennium that was a tougher, a grittier, more rough around the edges Bond. They decided to make him and the entire movie a throwback. I don't know why they did that. I don't know why they decided to do this. Why did they decide, okay, you know what? Let's not be like any of the other Daniel Craig films. Let's make Spectre a throwback to the 60s Bond films, and let's try to turn Daniel Craig into Sean Connery. And it doesn't work. Because Daniel Craig isn't built for that type of Bond. He doesn't have what it takes to pull that off. He said a few lines of dialogue that were alright, that he had a good, okay line delivery in, but the rest were just cringe-inducing to me. He just can't pull off that suave, let's say a one-liner type personality that Sean Connery, even Roger Moore, or Pierce Brosnan could do. And even Pierce Brosnan himself didn't like this movie. Pierce Brosnan had some of the same problems I had with this movie. Just too long, it's boring, and it just isn't as exciting as it should be. It really isn't. A Bond film should not be boring. It shouldn't be boring. Skyfall was a slow-paced movie, but it was a slow burn, and it built up to a big climax and had some good twists, and it had an excellent villain played by Javier Bardem, played Silva. Here, we have a very slow-paced movie that has none of the action sequences are really that memorable, except for the helicopter sequence in the beginning, and the little bit where you have the plane versus the car, you know, James Bond in the plane versus Bautista in a van in the snow. That was a pretty good sequence. But then after that, it's a whole bunch of forgettable action sequences that don't really stick with you. You don't remember them after you see the movie. They don't really get your pulse pounding that much either. A decent fist fight between Bond and Bautista on the train, but that's it. This is like the newest Bond film. It's just so low key and just so subtle and just so, it just doesn't try hard enough that it's just mind blowing. Even as a climax, it's just spoiler climax where it's just a girl's in a building and Bond needs to save her. Of course he does, and then he just gets in a boat and then shoots the bad guy's helicopter down. That's your climax. That's all it is. It's a it's a pretty pathetic climax. To be honest, you go from Skyfall where a train falls into the fucking ground to save a girl from a building that's about to blow up and then shoot the guy in the helicopter down. Very, very, very. It's pretty lame. This movie is lame. So now I got that initial, first right off the bat rant off that, there. I just had to get some stuff off my chest there. Let's talk about some pros first. Some things about the film I do like. And then let's talk about the cons. And then I'll give you guys my final thoughts on the film and give you my rating for the movie. I don't need to go in depth on the plot. I will in cons. And I'm just going to say spoilers for that. But I don't really want to go right down into the plot. I don't really want to do that. So anyway, in terms of pros, like I said, there are a few action sequences I do like. I love the helicopter sequence in the beginning in Mexico. I love the way that it's shot. The direction is fine. Sam Mendes does a good job directing the movie. He didn't write it. But I think maybe he did though. No, you have a screenplay by four guys, 4 people. It took 4 people to write this movie. I did not know that. It took 4 people to write Spectre. John Logan, Neil Purvis, Robert Wade, and Jez Butterworth. Should have known better. That's what happens when you let the relative of Mrs. Butterworth, a fucking bottle of syrup, try to write a screenplay. 4 writers? It took 4 people to write this movie? Wow. I'm shocked. I'll get into that later. Why I'm so shocked that it took 4 people to write this. Going back to the pros, Sam Mendes didn't write the film. He just directed it. He did a great job directing it. It looks great. The cinematography is gorgeous. It's really well done by Hoyt van Hoytema. I don't know if I said his last name correctly. The editing is good by Lee Smith. There's some decent. I mean, I did like some of the supporting cast's performances. I like Ralph Fiennes as M. I thought he did a good job here, and he showed a lot more passion than Daniel Craig did. I thought for the most part. Um, Bautista did a good job as Hinks. You never hear his name. He's just a guy with, for some reason, he has silver-tipped fingernails, silver-tipped thumbnails. None of the other fingernails have silver on them. It's like this franchise's version of Jaws, I guess. Richard Kiel. And so he's just a big brute. It's a throwback move. He's just a big brute who doesn't say anything. And the only time he says anything is the word shit, and he says it terribly. But he was an imposing presence, and I do give Bautista credit for that. Not a good act, not a mind-blowing performance, but it was a pro because he definitely had a presence about him. That's more than I can say for Christoph Waltz, which I'll get into more in depth later. Ben Whishlaw was good as Q again. I like Ben Whishlaw. I like that character. He wasn't in the film that much, but he was good for a little bit that he had to do. There was Jesper Christensen who played Mr. White. I liked his performance. I thought he did a good job. And I also thought Naomie Harris who played Moneypenny was good. So I thought, out of the performances, I thought those were pretty good. But the three main performances, three main actors, I just thought were really just not that great for me personally. I really did. I thought they were just below what they could have been. And like I said, I didn't mind the music by Thomas Newman. I know a lot of people tend to think it's bad, but I think it works with the film. It's not super memorable, but it was a good, rousing score. That's the only time the film really got my blood pumping was the score. So I got to give credit to Thomas Newman for that. Going back to a couple more sequences, like I said, the plane versus the SUV sequence I liked. I liked the fight on the train, and I liked the little bit of action at the main villains of Spectre's headquarters, Christoph Waltz's headquarters. It did remind me of a video game, but I didn't think that was a bad thing. I like that little bit of action, a little bit of the shootout. But that's it. That's it. That's really it. A few one-liners maybe by Bond, but the best one I already saw in the trailer. So that's really all I got in terms of pros. In terms of cons, I got a lot more. The writing from four people, took 4 people to write the screenplay, which is basically, the events of Skyfall, a film that basically, at the end of the movie, the 00 program has proved its usefulness. A film that already dealt with the 00 program is out of date. The 00 program needs to be retired. It's too dangerous, blah, blah, blah. It's too much money, whatever. We already dealt with that. The 00 program, we don't need it anymore. And then in Skyfall, the whole of everything in that movie proves that we need the 00 program. Then in Spectre, for some reason the screenwriters are like, let's make a sequel where we're doing the same shit all over again. The 00 program is out of date. The 00 program we don't need it anymore. And out with the old and in with the new, with this new technology, this new mass computer thing that can keep track of everybody and use drones and shit to do what the 00 program does. And you have this cocky asshole guy who's I think he's got a code name. He's the hell is it? M? No, that's right, Ralph Fiennes. What the fuck is this guy's name? They're not telling me who he is, like, on here. Oh, C. Andrew Scott, who plays Max Denbigh. And this guy's just a stereotypical cocky asshole. And kind of guy you want to punch in the face. C as in cock, because he's a cock. So he's a cocky cockface. So that's what he is, and he's also, of course, he's in with Spectre. Duh. And so that's what we're doing this again. And I'm just like, didn't I already see this similar plot in a Mission Impossible movie? Like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? 00 program is outdated, needs to be replaced. The newest big thing is so much better storyline. Why? It took 4 writers to come up with that? And then if that isn't bad enough, they throw in this stupid need to tie up everything from the other Craig Bond films to this movie. Why do you have to tie up, why did you have to tie every villain from the other Daniel Craig Bond films to Spectre? Why did you have to make Le Chiffre part of Spectre, and Silva part of Spectre, and the guy from Quantum of Solace part of Spectre? Why do we need to do that? It's completely pointless. There's no reason for that. It's just an attempt to try to make the film smarter than it really is. I don't know what the fuck the point of that was. It just comes out of nowhere. It's just like, why? They weren't wearing Spectre rings or anything. You just really just pulled that out of your ass, didn't you? You want to tie up every loose end for some reason. And if that isn't crazy enough, you get, for the screenwriters, I guess they had an ultimatum from the producers. We want Blofeld. We want Blofeld in this Daniel Craig Bond franchise, and we don't care how you do it. We don't care if it doesn't make any sense. We want Blofeld. And I'm like, why? Why does Daniel Craig need Blofeld in his franchise? Why can't he just have villains like Silva that are unique villains, that are different, that aren't the same shit we've already seen a million times? Why do we have to have Blofeld in this franchise? So what happens? They shoehorn Blofeld into this. Big spoiler alert here. The big twist is that Oberhauser, the guy who's played by Christoph Waltz, is actually Ernst Starvo Blofeld. And get this great nugget of great reveal, wonderful motivation that this new Blofeld has to create Spectre. He creates Spectre and torments Bond with Spectre because, well, when he was a boy, his daddy adopted James Bond. He was an orphan, and his daddy paid too much attention to Bond, and so he was upset, and so he killed his dad, and then he created Spectre in order to torment Bond because he has daddy issues. Oh, my poor daddy didn't love me as much as he loved you, Bond. So screw you, Bond. I'm making Spectre. What the f... It took 4 writers. Which of the 4 writers came up with that fucking stupid idea? Because I'd like to slap you right in the fucking face. What the hell is wrong with you? Why are you... It's bad enough that you have to shove Blofeld into this franchise. But it's even worse that you make his motivations the most cliched thing imaginable. And it just makes him come across as a total joke. Hey, my dad didn't love me as much as he loved you. Like, come on. It's so terrible. He creates Spectre. He's the leader of this big, massive underground organization that's causing all these terrorist attacks. Is supposedly one of the scariest, most intimidating presences in the entire world, and it's all because his daddy didn't love him enough. Come on! What the hell are you smoking, writers? So because of that, Blofeld comes across as a total pussy, total weakling, and Christoph Waltz's performance doesn't help matters much either. I guess his Blofeld's supposed to be crazy, but it doesn't help that you're just laughable. You're going around going, cuckoo, cuckoo, and it's just, he's a blabbermouth who won't shut up. That's one time where Bond had a good line. It's like, because he's trying to put him in his torture chair. He's got Bond in his torture chair, and he's talking, blabbing his mouth off, and Bond's like, I'm going to torture you, I'm going to do this to you. And Bond's like, well, that's better than listening to you talk. Okay, yeah. So there were some good moments. The writers came up with some good zingers. That was one of them. Definitely wasn't a good one when they had Bond at a health club, and for some reason he can't get his martini, shaken not stirred, so they give him like a shitty health drink, and it was just a really awkward sequence. It just wasn't funny. It was just bad. And there was a decent amount of those where you're just like, oh, that's just a bad joke. So, yeah, Blofeld, his daddy issues. Yeah, fucking break. And Christoph Waltz's performance, did not impress me. It did not impress me at all. It was very forgettable. I mean, he came across as an evil dentist. I mean, a dentist is being kind. I mean, he came across as like, this is like a, yeah, he was like an evil dentist. I'm not afraid of, I mean, it's not Corbin Burnson and the dentist. It's just like a regular dentist guy who's just a little bit crazy. And puts Bond in his dentist chair of doom and tries to drill holes in him. And this is how great the screenplay is. I know the Bond films aren't the most realistic things out there, but the previous film was one of the most gritty and one of the most down-to-earth, one of the most realistic Bond films. And for some reason, this movie decides, hey, let's go back to the 60s again. I'm like, why? Why are we doing that? We have the old 60s Bond car, too. We have a new car. And we have all these prototype cars. And we have a new car that has all these gadgets that don't work. And then we have a very underwhelming car chase. One of the most forgettable car chases I've ever seen in a Bond movie. The car chase between Bond and Hinks in Rome was so forgettable that it was unreal to me. I could not believe how forgettable and how boring this car chase was. It was just, it seemed like they had these prototype cars. They didn't want to wreck them. They didn't want to do anything to damage them too much. So they just drove around at a decent speed around the roads of Rome. And they had this one scene where Bond ends up going in his car, gets on the wall of, like it's like this. I don't know. It's a wall or something. You have the road, and then you have this thing that curves up like this. And so Bond gets on that and uses the jet boost, and then gets away from Hinks. But you already saw that in the trailer. And honestly, I've seen that entire chase done better in Greece. When you have a car chase, and Greece has a better car chase than you do, a musical, that's a problem. That's a really big problem. And then for some reason, half this car chase is just Bond talking to Moneypenny. And it just had no life to it. It was completely lifeless. And then after that, we have another long-ass stretch where there's nothing that fucking happens. So you have lackluster action sequences, other than the few that I just mentioned. Way too long patches where there is no action, and there isn't anything else that's interesting. You have Blofeld being a very forgettable villain. He's supposed to be Bond's arch nemesis, and he's just an evil dentist or an evil optometrist. I'm not scared. I'm not intimidated by Blofeld in this. He's just a joke. He's just going cuckoo, cuckoo. I think the writers are crazy. That's why they wrote this shit. I don't know why. So, and then of course you have Bond, he's having his Bond girl. You have the Bond girl for the film. And I think that's a big con as well. She's one of the most forgettable Bond girls I've ever seen. Lea Seydoux, or Seydoux, or however you pronounce her last name. I really don't know how to pronounce her last name. My bad. I didn't think her performance was very good. And I thought her character was poorly written. And she wasn't a badass. You want to see a badass Bond type, a real badass Bond chick? Go see Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. The woman in that film was way more of a Bond chick than this chick was. She was just nothing. There was nothing memorable about her performance. I thought it was pretty poor, to be honest. I think she needs to go back to acting class and learn how to act. And her look wasn't that striking. And I didn't buy the chemistry. There was no chemistry between her and Daniel Craig. And I didn't buy them falling madly in love with each other either. I didn't buy them deciding, well, Bond's retiring at the end and he's going to go off and live with her. I didn't buy that shit either. I don't buy that these two are the perfect couple. I don't. Just because she likes her martinis, shaken not stirred, doesn't mean that she's the perfect choice for James Bond. I mean, especially, why would he settle down so quickly? Especially after the events of Skyfall, where a girl that he was really passionately in love with, and I bought, got shot in the head in front of him. But he's gonna go right into it again with this girl. It just fell out of place, and it didn't make much sense to me. And they didn't have any chemistry. If they had chemistry and she could act and she actually kicked some ass, I'm not counting the few times she pot-shotted tried to pot shot Bautista near the end. She still got knocked out. And she still got captured at the end and got tied up in a building. And Bond had to save her. So she's not that much of a badass. The film tries to make her appear as a badass because she knows how to use a gun, but it just doesn't really come across that way at all. Because the film poorly handled. The Bond girl's inconsistent. The Bond girl's inconsistent, and so is Bond. Daniel Craig at one point would look like he's got life and he's interested, and on another he looks like he's a walking zombie. And I don't blame him. If you saw the script, it's like, this is bloody bullocks. I don't know what I can fucking do with this. I just gotta do the best I can. You have stupid other shit. There are more cons from the screenplay. Like, for some reason, and this is going back to what I was trying to talk about before, I know a lot of Bond films aren't realistic, but a lot of these other Bond films, Skyfall it's really as close to realistic as a Bond film can get. And you go from that to a 60s throwback that has scenes where Bond is tied up in a torture chair and Bond gets drilled in a certain area in his neck that's supposed to make him lose his memory, and nothing happens. It doesn't do anything to him. He gets drilled right in the place where Blofeld is talking about, you will lose the memory and everything, and motor functions will be messed up, and nothing fucking happens. He's fine. No problem whatsoever. And then how does he get out of this predicament? Well, his watch has a bomb in it. Wow. That's our big grand finale. It's a big grand gadget. A watch with a bomb in it. I am so amazed. So the watch with the bomb blows up. That's how Blofeld gets his scar. And the Bond goes in and shoots other guys and blows up the facility in a sequence I didn't mind. It flies off in the helicopter. And then you gotta go back to the whole thing about M needs to stop the new whatever computer thing from going online. Cockhead falls out a fucking window after the system gets shut down. Bond has to go in and save the girl from the building before it explodes. Then shoots Blofeld's helicopter down. Has him at gunpoint, but he has no bullets, so he can't kill him. Guy gets arrested. Bond steals another car because he stole like 2 cars in this movie because it's James Bond. I guess he just is a Captain Carjacker. I guess he took advice from Captain America from the 1990 movie. He just skipped the I feel sick part. And steals another car and drives off with this new Bond girl. And then I'm just left there like, that was it? That was it. That was it. That was that. Over 2 hours, and that's all I fucking got. I feel ripped off. I feel ripped off by James Board, 00 Snooze. I mean, come on. 00 Snoozer. 00 Snoozing. Just, really, it was a very boring, slow-paced, forgettable Bond film. There was just so much that was wrong with it for me personally. Story wasn't engaging. The characters weren't that great. The action, there were the helicopter chase is the best part out of it. The other ones, there was bits and pieces. Some of the action sequences I didn't mind. But even the fight with Bautista had a problem because before he gets thrown out, he has to open his mouth and delivers one of the worst line deliveries of the word shit I've ever heard in my life. It's just like, it has to be seen to be believed. It's that bad. It's like, oh, shit! It was so fucking bad. And then you have a weak Bond villain with a shitty motivation, and you have a lame climax. That sums up the movie. I think Spectre is lame. It's a shadow of better Bond films before it. It's a shadow of Skyfall. And I thought it was going to be not as good as Skyfall, but I didn't think it was going to be this bad. And that's the thing. I didn't think it was going to be this bad. But, whew. For me personally, it was. This is the most disappointing film of the year for me. And I've already explained the reasons why I feel that way. And I'm just going to say, if you guys enjoyed it, you love the throwback elements, going back to the 60s Bond, to each their own. I don't like that idea. I don't like the idea that every Bond film, every new incarnation of Bond, has to hold on to the past. It can't innovate. It has to keep going backwards and try to force a square peg into a round hole and make every new Bond franchise a version of the classic Bond. If I want to see the classic Bond, I'll watch the classic Bond. That's not why I want to see the Daniel Craig films. I want to watch the Daniel Craig movies to see a different Bond, a different take on Bond. I don't want to see him turn into Sean Connery. That's the thing. There's only one Sean Connery. Daniel Craig isn't going to be Sean Connery, so I don't know why they tried to do that with this film. And it just comes across as very out of place, especially with this particular franchise. And this reminds me of Die Another Day. Die Another Day decided we're going to be more like a classic Bond film with all these gadgets, and we're going to be crazy, and we're going to be zany, be over the top. And then look how well that worked out. That was terrible. Set the franchise back years, and then they had to reboot it with Casino Royale. And now it looks like they're unraveling all of that hard work and going back to square one again. I don't know why. I don't get it. And I know there are a lot of people who love it. To each their own. I don't like this idea. I've seen Die Another Day. I don't want another Die Another Day. This wasn't as bad as Die Another Day, but it had some of the same problems. So it's just, Daniel Craig's Bond does not fit with the classic Bond. It just doesn't fit. Those two don't mesh. There's a reason why he was cast for a new version of Bond. He wasn't cast to be a classic Bond. He was casted to be a new Bond for the new generation with a new approach. And now they're throwing that all away and just trying to make him Sean Connery 2.0. And I really don't appreciate that. I don't like that. And I think it's the wrong direction to take this franchise in. But that's just me personally. A lot of people like it, and that's cool. I didn't like that approach. I didn't like how boring this movie was. I didn't like how the screenplay was just so full of cliches, and it's just so generic. It's so generic. I felt like I was getting that drill that was being drilled into Bond's neck, drilled right into my neck, or right in my eyes, right up my nose, right in my dick hole. I felt like that because it was so generic. It hurt. So yeah, this is one of the worst Bond films for me. Period. Is it the worst film I've ever seen? No. Is it the worst Bond film? No. There are worse Bond films than this. Is this the worst film of the year for me? No. The Pixels is worse. Harbinger Down is worse. The Visit is worse. But this film isn't much better than those films. And that's what's really annoying. That's what's really frustrating about it. So, yeah, I really don't know what else to say about Spectre. Except it was a rated out of 5 stars. I'm giving it 2. 2 out of 5. I think it's a really poor film for the most part. I think it's a below average movie. It's like it's stagnant. It doesn't have a good pace. It's slow. It's boring. It's dull. Even the lead, even Bond himself looks like he's bored, and I can't blame him. And this is just a film that I personally just did not care for the most part. It took a huge nosedive after the excellent, rousing opening sequence in Mexico City. For some reason, it's like, hey, screw that movie. We're not making that movie. It felt like it was from a different movie, because then we get to the actual rest of the movie, and I'm like, well, that feels extremely out of place. Because that felt more like a Daniel Craig Bond film, and the rest of the movie's just some half-ass throwback to Bond films of yesteryear. But anyway, yeah, the 2 stars is being generous probably, but it's mainly for a few good action set pieces, some good direction, good editing, cinematography, and a few of the performances that I liked, and little decent bits of one-liners, some decent writing, but that's it. I can't give it any more than that, and I really wanted to, and it just wasn't good enough. to warrant that. But anyway, thank you for watching my review and rant on Spectre, and I will see you guys later. See ya.